Welcome to Detective Reddington's office. Take a seat and listen to this story. It will be interesting. Morning light filtered through the blinds, painting yellow stripes across the floor. I stood at the bedroom door, watching Emma as she hurriedly stuffed clothes into her suitcase, barely acknowledging my presence. "Have you packed everything for the trip?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Emma barely glanced up. "Yeah, all set. It's just a work trip. Nothing major." Her words didn't reassure me. We'd been married for 9 years, and in that time, I had never seen her so distant. Her usually neat hair hung loose and messy, as if she didn't care anymore. She moved around the room with an air of impatience, more focused on getting out the door than on the fact that I was still standing there. "A week away, that's not nothing," I tried to add. "Well, a bunch of client meetings. I might even stay longer if things take more time," she said curtly, zipping her suitcase closed. Her tone was distant, almost indifferent, as though my presence was a minor inconvenience in her grand plan. Something felt wrong in the pit of my stomach. We hadn't been talking much lately, and this trip only seemed to widen the gap between us. All those late-night work calls, secretive texts she quickly hid when I got close. My instincts were screaming that something wasn't right. "Where's the conference this time?" I asked, fishing for more information. "It's a small town, about 3 hours from here. Just meetings and a few seminars. Nothing exciting," she said quickly, clearly wanting to end the conversation. "All right?" I nodded, stepping forward to kiss her goodbye. But she turned away, pretending to be busy with her last-minute packing. "I'll call you later." She tossed the words over her shoulder, grabbing her suitcase and leaving me standing in the quiet of the room. The door clicked shut behind her, and my chest tightened. Something was definitely wrong. This trip was the final straw in the growing pile of my suspicions. Whatever it was, I had to find out the truth. The days dragged on longer than I expected. Emma had been gone for 3 days already, and with each passing day, my doubts only grew stronger. She rarely called, and even when she did, her voice sounded distant, uninterested. She spoke in short, clipped sentences, avoided details, and always found a reason to cut the conversation short. "I'm in a meeting," or "I'm busy, I'll call later." Sometimes she didn't answer at all, which was unusual for her. I sat in our empty living room, trying to figure out what was really happening on that business trip. Maybe I was just overthinking? But her cold tone, those evasive answers. No, something was definitely off. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A new message. The number was unknown. It was an email with attachments. "You need to know the truth." I tensed up. Who was this? And why were they sending me this? My heart pounded as I opened the attachments. There were several photos, each one worse than the last. The first showed Emma standing on a hotel balcony with a man I had never seen before. They were laughing, drinking wine, their faces way too close for it to be just business. The second photo showed them in a restaurant, holding hands across the table. And the last, they were kissing with no shame. My heart sank. Something twisted inside me. Anger, shock, betrayal. I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. Emma, my wife of 9 years, was with another man on this so-called business trip. My world started to crumble. That was when I realized I couldn't just sit at home, wondering what was happening. I had to take action. The night after I received those photos was sleepless. My mind raced, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I knew I had to find out more. There was no longer any doubt in my mind. Someone wanted me to know the truth. Whoever sent those photos was trying to open my eyes. At dawn, I made a decision. I packed a few clothes, threw them into a duffel bag, and hit the road. The place Emma had gone was a small town about 3 hours away. Seemed like the perfect spot for a quiet business retreat. But it was also where she was cheating on me, and I wasn't going to wait until she came back to confront her. The drive felt endless. I sped along the highway, not caring about the speed limit. My only focus was getting there, seeing it for myself. When I finally arrived, the sun was high in the sky, but the day felt dim. The hotel where she was staying was simple, unremarkable, the kind of place where no one would suspect anything unusual. But I knew that inside, behind those walls, was where she had betrayed me. I parked nearby and started watching the entrance to the hotel. I didn't know if I would see her right away, but my gut told me I was right to come. After a while, the door swung open, and there she was, Emma, walking out with the man from the photos. They were holding hands, and she looked different, more alive, more carefree than I'd seen her in months. She looked happy, and it wasn't with me. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I couldn't just sit there any longer. I had to act. I knew I couldn't confront her right away. She needed to fall into the trap herself. My anger turned into cold determination. I decided that I was going to collect all the evidence I could, leaving her no room for excuses. My patience had run out, and now I had a plan. I waited for them to leave the hotel again. As soon as they did, I headed inside. Posing as someone who had lost their key, I asked for a new one at the front desk. A simple lie, and I had access to their room. Once inside, I quickly looked around. The bed, the table, her suitcase. Everything looked ordinary, but the stench of betrayal hung in the air. My place, the place of her husband, had been violated by another man. I pulled the hidden cameras from my bag. I had bought them during those sleepless nights after receiving the photos, thinking through every possible detail. I set up the cameras to capture every angle of the room, especially the bed. Afterward, I laid sheets of paper on the floor, marking every step I took. It wasn't just symbolic. It was necessary to show her that I had been there and knew everything. Once everything was set, all I had to do was wait. I left the room and returned to my car, parked around the corner. Something inside me had changed. The blind rage I'd felt before was gone. Now I was cold, calculating, like a hunter waiting to strike. I sat in my car, watching the entrance to the hotel. Hours passed, but I didn't mind. I knew they would come back soon, and my trap would be waiting for them. Every now and then, doubts crept into my mind. Was I doing the right thing? Should I have just walked away? But each passing minute only solidified my plan. Eventually, I saw them, walking together like a couple, not caring who might see. She looked calm, almost glowing. My hands clenched into fists, but I forced myself to stay in control. It would all be over soon. They entered the hotel, and I lifted my phone, starting to record their arrival. This would be yet another piece of evidence for my growing collection. I watched them disappear into their room, and my heart raced. I knew that soon I would see the look on their faces when they realized their betrayal wasn't a secret anymore. Minutes after they went inside, I was ready. The cameras were rolling, capturing everything. They had no idea that I was watching their every move. Back in my car, I opened my laptop and started live streaming the footage from the cameras I had set up in their room. What I saw was exactly what I expected, but it still hit me like a freight train. Emma and her lover, Mike, as I later found out his name, were sitting on the bed, laughing, kissing, without a care in the world. There was no hesitation, no guilt. She didn't look like a woman troubled by her marriage. I watched them in excruciating detail. Everything they did was now documented on video, no detail left unrecorded. As much as it hurt, I couldn't stop watching. I needed all the proof I could gather to finally end this. Every kiss, every touch was captured on camera. I couldn't believe this was really happening. Emma seemed so cold, so heartless. Had our years together meant nothing to her? I gathered all the footage and drove straight to my friend Paul's office. Paul was a lawyer, and I knew he would help me without asking too many questions. When I walked into his office, he immediately noticed something was wrong. "John, you look like you've seen a ghost," he said as I entered. "That's because I've learned something that destroyed my life," I replied, handing him the flash drive with the videos. Paul listened carefully as I explained everything, from my suspicions of Emma to following her and gathering all the evidence. When I finished, he nodded and said, "All right, now we know what to do. We're going to destroy her the same way she destroyed you." It was hard to believe, but by that point I had no choice. Paul began preparing the divorce papers, and we started planning how to make sure Emma not only lost me but everything else in her life as well. "She's going to be left with nothing," Paul said as we worked on our plan. And it's only fair. When Emma came back from her trip, I was ready. I didn't need to argue with her or create a scene. She came back to a house filled with surprises. I wasn't just going to divorce her. I was going to destroy her socially and professionally. She walked into the house like nothing had happened. My response was calm. I didn't show anger or pain, just cold indifference. She must have been surprised that I didn't ask about her trip or pretend to care. But little did she know I already had all the evidence. I sat at the table when she walked into the kitchen. "How was the trip?" she asked, as if there was no chasm of betrayal between us. I looked at her calmly, but I no longer saw the woman I loved. "Fine," I replied shortly. She could sense something was wrong but didn't dare ask yet. I gathered all the videos and photos and created an email. Then, I sent it to all our friends, Emma's coworkers, and even her boss. Everyone who mattered in her life received the evidence of her infidelity. I knew it was cruel, but I didn't care anymore. She deserved to feel the same humiliation I had been feeling for weeks. The moment she got her first phone call from a friend, I was sitting right next to her. Her face turned pale as she realized that everyone knew. Her career, her reputation, everything was destroyed in an instant. She looked at me in desperation, but I felt nothing for her anymore. Emma was in shock. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing, and messages kept flooding in. Each new call or text was like another blow, and every time she looked at her screen, her face went whiter. "John, what's going on?" she finally asked, her voice filled with anger and fear. Her eyes were wide with panic. I met her gaze, calm as ever. "You know what's happening," I replied coldly. "What did you do?" she demanded, on the verge of tears now, realizing what was unfolding around her. "I just showed everyone who you really are," I said, my voice sharp and cold as a blade. She held her phone, reading the messages. Her eyes scanned the screen rapidly, and with each line she read, her expression shifted from shock to despair. All our friends, her colleagues, even her boss now knew about her affair. Everyone had seen the videos of her and Mike in that hotel room. Her social life, her career, it was all crumbling before her eyes. "You can't do this to me," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. But I didn't feel any pity. Her tears meant nothing to me now. "You did this to yourself," I said, taking a deep breath, holding back any remaining emotion. "Now you have nothing, no job, no friends. You made your choice, and I just made mine." The days that followed were hell for Emma. Her phone never stopped ringing. Colleagues were deleting her from social media. Friends sent her angry messages. She couldn't explain it away, couldn't make excuses. Everyone knew the truth, and even her attempts to hide her affair were futile. She couldn't go back to work. The video of her infidelity had reached her boss, and it was inevitable. She lost her position, one of the most important things in her life. Everything she had built over the years was collapsing around her. I watched from the sidelines, and honestly, I didn't care anymore. My heart no longer belonged to her. When she tried to talk to me again, I coldly responded, "It's over, Emma. I want nothing more to do with you." A few days later, Paul and I met to finalize the divorce. I had all the evidence, and we were preparing the documents. I no longer had any desire to face Emma, so Paul handled everything for me. As I signed the papers, I felt a strange mix of relief and pain. Everything Emma and I had built over 9 years was over. This wasn't how I had envisioned our future, but I knew it was the only right decision. "You did the right thing," Paul said as we finished up. "She destroyed your life, but now she's left with nothing." It was true. Emma had lost everything, me, her job, her friends, but I felt no pity or sympathy for her anymore. Her choices had sealed her fate. The divorce process was quick. Paul took care of all the details, and soon we had confirmation from the court. Emma no longer had any right to our shared home, and I stayed there alone. All her belongings were packed and sent to her new apartment. When I was finally alone, I felt an odd sense of peace. I was no longer tied down by her lies and betrayal. My mind was free of the pain, and I began to think about my future. In the first few days after the divorce, I just enjoyed the silence. My home was once again a place where I could be at ease. I started doing things I had once loved but had put on hold because of our relationship issues. My new life started taking shape. I reconnected with friends, got back into sports, and even resumed my old hobby of hiking. Each new day felt like a step forward. I no longer thought about Emma or her betrayal. She was part of my past where she belonged. When I happened to see her on the street months later, she looked broken. Her once bright eyes were now dull. She was no longer the confident woman I had known. Maybe she regretted her choices, but it was too late. She tried to say something, but I just walked past her without stopping. That was the last time I saw Emma. In time, I realized that Emma's betrayal hadn't broken me. It had made me stronger. I became more thoughtful and cautious in my relationships with people. My friends had supported me through the hardest moments, and I was grateful for that. I started a new relationship, but now I knew what to look out for and what mistakes to never repeat. My life after Emma's betrayal was different, better, stronger. And though those memories sometimes resurfaced, they no longer had power over my present or my future.